The Oscar goes to The Boy and the Heron.
Wow, 2023 was actually an outstanding year for animation, with truly one of the most stacked lineups I've ever seen in history. There were some incredible movies, and I'd even be willing to bet you haven't heard of some of the best ones. But the Academy Awards took place the other night, and to many people's surprise, including my own, The Boy and the Heron beat out the favored Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. I knew it would be between the pair, and I knew Miyazaki had a shot, but I was still very surprised by this outcome, and I think many others were as well. Shameik Moore, Miles Morales himself, claimed Spider-Verse was robed. Total highway robbery. But with such an outstanding year for animation, I wanted to explore this a little deeper. Was Spider-Verse robed of the Oscar? Did they deserve the win over Hayao Miyazaki himself? Was one of the other nominees actually better than either of them? Well, lucky for you, I've gone through all 5 nominees for Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards, so we can get to the bottom of which was most deserving. And if you end up enjoying this video, surprise, the analysis for these films is actually cut from a massive video where I do the same thing for all 99 nominations in the history of the category, which is available over on my second channel, which is also called Johnny Two Cellos, but all lowercase, just go with it. It is a 6.5 hour bombardment of animated film analysis meant to take an in-depth look at the Academy's nomination tendencies. Please check it out. It was a lot of work, and I'm really proud of it. Hey, are you a fan of mobile gaming? What if I told you that you could play your favorite mobile games and earn gift cards while doing it? Today's sponsor is Mistplay, an app that can help you do exactly that. If you like gaming, Mistplay can help you discover tons of new mobile games through their catalog, spanning countless genres: puzzle, word, adventure, strategy, you name it. And of course, the more you play, the more you earn. By playing games through Mistplay, you can rack up points that you can then redeem for gift cards from your favorite brands like Amazon, Walmart, Visa, Xbox, PlayStation, and more. Over $60 million in gift cards have already been redeemed. I've discovered some great games through Mistplay. One that really surprised me was Critical Strike. It's wild the kind of first-person shooter experiences you can get on phones these days. I'm also just kind of old school, and so playing a good old-fashioned game of solitaire while earning points doing it, pretty gratifying. Visit mistplay.com/cellos or click the link in the description to download Mistplay for free. If you sign up today, you can get 200 bonus points, and if you use my code CELLOS inside the app, you can get an additional 50 bonus points to go towards redeeming your very first gift card. Once again, click the link in the description to get started on your Mistplay journey today. Despite very publicly retiring after The Wind Rises in 2013, Hayao Miyazaki simply could not stay away from creating, which, if you've ever seen The Wind Rises, should have been obvious. When asked why he returned to create this most recent film, Miyazaki stated, "Because I wanted to." And what better reason is there? What do you people need from him? In Japan, the film's title simply translates to "How Do You Live?", which might be the greatest title I've ever heard in my life, and is something I ask myself at least 4 times in the shower every morning. It also makes the US title, The Boy and the Heron, all the more disappointing. The film, though, not disappointing at all. Back in 2017, in the earliest days of production, Miyazaki's producer Toshio Suzuki claimed he was basically making this film for his grandson. It's a way of saying Grandpa is moving on to the next world, but he's leaving behind this film. And if that's the sentiment, How Do You Live truly is the most perfect title. And I think, despite this film obviously going through massive changes while being produced, that this core idea is very present. To me, the film is once again Miyazaki's deep reflection and meditation on not just his career, but his life. The entire story is built around its main character, Mahito, losing his mother in a horrific firebombing. Really the only time a Miyazaki film is ever opened on something this deeply traumatic, which obviously lends to Suzuki's claim about the film's origins. How to move on after losing somebody close to you. How do you live? The film does such a great job portraying Mahito's pain and trauma beyond the opening sequence, made even more difficult by how quickly his father has moved on, to his mother's sister no less. He barely speaks for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the film. His body language shows severe discomfort. The moment he is alone, he collapses from emotional exhaustion and weeps in his sleep. And you get the sense that it's less about the awkwardness of his new family situation and more about his own fear of opening back up, his fear that he'll lose someone important to him again, a lesson that is near universal in regards to relationships on this planet. And this is just one example of how this film so brilliantly encompasses its Japanese title. It feels like everything Mahito experiences is teaching him how to live, teaching him about the nuances of life itself. One of my favorite sequences in the film is the flight of the Wara Wara. As they float away and the pelicans begin begin to eat them, Mahito believes he's witnessing a horrifying injustice. He's then upset when Lady Hime launches fire spells at the pelicans, as some of the Warawara are taken out collaterally, something she had to do so that some of them could survive. And later, he actually meets a pelican and learns that they too were taken here against their will, that they are victims of a system that doesn't provide enough food for them. They were simply doing what they had to do to survive. It's such a brilliant microcosm of life itself, how injustices aren't simply that. There are systems in place, sacrifices that must be made, and through all of it, there is joy and pain. Mahito's relationship to the Heron himself is another brilliant example of this. He initially takes on this terrifying antagonistic role, taunting and bullying Mahito, insisting that he can see his dead mother again. But the moment Mahito properly faces off against the Heron and gets one quality hidden on him, he actually becomes pretty pathetic. On the outside, he looks like this fierce, scary, majestic bird, and on the inside, as it turns out, he is a sad, broken little dude. At first, it almost feels like this thing is tackling too many ideas, but after rewatching the film 3 times now, I truly think it is always focused on that core question: how do you live? In an interview with the New York Times, Miyazaki was asked if the film will give us the answer, and he replied, "I am making this movie because I do not have the answer." The film itself is Miyazaki's most reflective, which felt impossible after The Wind Rises. I think this film is his own subconscious trying to answer the question, and it's filled with so many ideas, but the last one I want to touch on is the idea of legacy. In this film, the great uncle seeks someone from his bloodline to continue his work, and I adore the way that this is portrayed, as a precariously stacked tower of blocks. It feels like the film is pointing out how ludicrous it is to demand that someone try and balance his teetering tower of life in addition to their own. The question of legacy goes hand in hand with Miyazaki. How will his studio continue beyond him? His own son has directed films, but he struggles to achieve close to Miyazaki's success. It's this question of whose responsibility is it to continue his work, and I think the answer this film gives is that it's irresponsible to ask that of anyone. Not other animators, not Goro, not his grandchildren, not the studio itself. Mahito's journey through this other world, one he was lured into by the promise of being able to see his mother, is beautiful. Yes, he does get to meet this younger version of his mother, and the moment that absolutely destroys me is when, despite knowing how her life will end, she doesn't even consider avoiding it. Excited by the mere prospect of getting to be Mahito's mother in the future, if even for a short time. And I think most beautifully, Mahito does emerge from that tower hand in hand with his mother, his new mother. He has opened up and allowed himself to love and be loved once again. There is so much to unpack in The Boy and the Heron. I think it's an astounding masterpiece, and we are beyond lucky that we've been given at least one more beautiful life lesson from Hayao Miyazaki. I gotta say, I was pretty happy to see Elemental's box office comeback after such an awful start. Pixar had this really long string of originals, and 2 of the most popular were denied theatrical releases because of the pandemic. It would have been a huge bummer if their first since just fully bombed. It was nice to see that it had legs, and hopefully makes originals continue to seem viable for Disney, especially because currently the future looks incredibly sequel-filled. That being said, I did not particularly connect to Elemental. There are some qualities I really admire, particularly the animation. Like, these character models are just mind-blowing. The way they both feel like fully formed rigs and also particle effects, the physics are insane. The city itself also looks stunning. There are seriously so many gorgeous sequences, and the persistent use of fire and water make for some unbelievable animation. But I really struggled to get into the story. The first half in particular I found pretty boring. I also found Wade to be insufferable at first. Absolutely loathed everything he did when he was introduced. Why was he so intent on reporting the Lumens' business at first? Dude went so far out of his way to avoid listening to anything Ember had to say, and then the moment he reported them, he listened and regretted it. If he was so easy to convince, why was it so difficult to convince him just to talk? Truly made me hate the guy. And like, the entire premise of this movie is that Wade effortlessly connects to people. I just can't help but think that would have been more effective if I didn't fucking hate him. I do think it started to find itself in the back half. Once Ember and Wade actually connect and go on their date, I emotionally connect to the story a lot more. After Wade becomes less insufferable, or becomes sufferable? How's that term work? The date is very cute, in addition to showcasing more really beautiful and well choreographed animation. And the music goes a long way too. This is a really strong score. I think Ember's arc mostly works once they really lean into it, and is obviously very inspired by real world immigrant stories. Her parents immigrated to this new place to give her a better life, and because of their hard work and sacrifice, Ember feels like she's obligated to meet their expectations. Whether that's the expectation to run her father's business when he retires, or the expectations of what kind of people she can date. I enjoyed seeing Ember's creative passions flourish over the course of the film. It's this thing she's always been good at and is subconsciously gravitated towards without ever wondering why. And I think where their relationship works best is Wade's encouragement of Ember's dreams. The sequence where he brings her to the Vivisteria in particular is really beautiful. However, what is going on with this world building? This feels sweatier than even the Cars universe. Water people just sort of live in water? Like they live in skyscrapers that have pools of water everywhere and they just walk around in it? All these people are made out of these elements, but also those elements exist separate of the people as well. Would this be like humans walking around in living rooms full of blood and hair? Yuck. I loved it visually, but just felt like the world raised way more questions than answers. That being said, I love that Peter Sohn was able to inject his lived experience as a child of immigrants into a film like this. I do think that that's the stuff that clearly shines through and works best about the film, and I'm certain there are people who relate to and appreciate that story a lot. I've got issues with Elemental, but there's plenty I enjoyed as well, and it's a really pretty film. We'll leave it at that. Man, I am so glad that Neona got this nomination. It's certainly not my favorite of the year, but this film being unceremoniously canned by Disney when they shut down Blue Sky Studios, only to be saved by Netflix and ultimately end up beating out Disney's big 100th anniversary princess musical for the Oscar nomination, poetic justice. Plus, Wish was bad. It's just a perfect illustration of why Disney's current attempts to sanitize and play it safe are actually harming them. They feared the LGBTQ themes and same-sex kiss so much that they missed out on a bona fide hit. Neona has a ton of great stuff going for it, adapted from an incredible graphic novel by Nate Stevenson, who also ran Netflix's She-Ra animated series. The world of Neona is really inspired. I really dig the bizarre amalgamation of the medieval and cyberpunk aesthetics. To me, the highlight of Neona, though, is Neona herself, this chaotic, shape-shifting character with deep-seated trauma from her childhood, a character who struggles to fit in because the society has deemed her a monster. If the LGBTQ themes weren't clear for you, they should be. She's a character who is told she has to fit herself into this societal box in order to exist. She has to hide her true self from the world if she wants to live any kind of life, even though fitting herself into that box is deeply uncomfortable.
Like my insides are itchy.
The metaphor is incredibly well handled, made even more impressive by the fact that her initial trauma was a misunderstanding that shaped the policies of the entire kingdom, a brilliant representation of how the rejection of different kinds of people begin on a systemic level. My main issues with Neona are in its sense of humor and often in its animation. Obviously, it's going for a very stylized, cel-shaded type look, and sometimes it looks excellent, but other times the design choices make the film just look unfinished to me. Their use of colored lights and the atmosphere in certain sequences blow me away, but sometimes it almost looks like the character models just haven't been fully rendered. And I know these are stylistic and design choices, but locations like the palace, which is meant to be very sanitized and boring, truly appear incomplete to me. Like when they're running through the castle, it reminded me of the endless, barely detailed labyrinths in the original Doom. I think they probably could have conveyed the same ideas in a more visually appealing way. Humor-wise, I think it's mostly solid, but the misses are huge misses for me. I think Todd is one of the most insufferable characters ever written, and not just because he's supposed to be in the story. They're clearly trying to get you to laugh at his ignorant broiness, and I just think it never lands even once. But overall, these are smaller gripes because the story delivers in a major way. Nemona's backstory with Glorith destroys me. Such a beautifully told tragedy, truly heartbreaking. And the way it connects to her new friendship with Ballister, having believed she finally found someone who would accept her, only for him to question her motives. Oof, this completely reignites that trauma in her, quite literally as she morphs into the monster that everyone told her she was. The sad irony being that it was only their ostracizing of Neona that led her down this path, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ballister's apology as Neona attempts to impale herself on Glorith's statue, man does it hit. Such a beautiful moment.
I see you, Neona.
Neona definitely has some tendencies in its storytelling, humor, and animation that I don't fully mesh with, but the core of that story shines through for sure. It absolutely nails the emotional beats in the most important ways, and the film itself is one of the most important success stories in the animation industry. A serious triumph. Well, the sad thing about Robot Dreams is that if you're watching this video when it's releasing, you probably haven't seen Robot Dreams. And that's because it's not releasing in theaters in the US until late May, 2.5 months after the Oscars, where it's up for Best Animated Feature. I was lucky enough to catch a screening followed by a Q&A with director Pablo Berger, and I am so glad I saw it in the theater. I want to absolutely beg you to go see this film when it's available in the movie theater. It is an outstanding experience, absolutely worth it. For the first part of this, I'm going to talk about the film in broader strokes before I get into spoiler territory. You know, in case it's something you want to see for yourself, and I know almost none of you have seen this. The film's animation is incredible. Somehow it's very simple, but still absolutely gorgeous, especially in how it captures New York City. I know it's kind of hacked to describe cities as characters. What is this, a Spider-Man video? But New York City brings so much to this film. You truly feel like every single background character has a full-on backstory and history that we simply aren't seeing. And despite all being animal people, they all feel so deeply human. It's outstanding. And the film is wordless. Absolutely no spoken dialogue. Brilliantly executed. The basic premise is simple. Robot Dreams is about two characters primarily, Dog and Robot. Dog is a lonely guy living in 1980s Manhattan, and after seeing an ad on TV, he buys and builds a robot, and the two spend an inseparable summer together becoming best friends. All while Robot learns about the world around him for the first time. That's the setup, and it is lovely. Things change substantially at a certain point, and I don't want to go in too deep before I hit spoilers, but ultimately this film is about relationships. It's about the connections we make in our lives, it's about the amazing times we spend together, the memories we make along the way, and what we carry with us after those times in our lives are over, even if those times end due to circumstances beyond our control. It is such an unbelievable affirmation of the connections we make in this life. I cannot say enough about how outstanding this film is. Truly, please go see it when it hits theaters. Okay. Now I'm going to dive into spoilers. The full sequences of Robot and Dog becoming friends are impossibly charming. There's this incredible roller skate dancing sequence where the pair groove to September by Earth, Wind & Fire. At first I felt it was maybe too cliche of a choice of song, but they end up using the song in such a profound way across the film. They sprinkle the melody into the score, Robot whistles it when he's thinking about Dog. It ends up representing the very connection that Dog and Robot have formed. The main conflict in the film is that on the last day of their amazing summer, Dog and Robot go to the beach. And after going in the water, Robot rusts and gets stuck on the beach itself. And when Dog returns the next day to fix him, the beach is closed until the following June. Dog tries everything to get him back, but nothing works, and he simply has to move on with his life, hoping that he can rescue him when the following summer comes. Over the course of the film, Robot continuously dreams about escaping the beach and continuing his life with Dog. Sometimes things go perfectly, sometimes he finds that he's been replaced, and every time he wakes up back on the beach. Meanwhile, Dog tries everything to move on and form new connections. He even ends up meeting this really cool duck who teaches him to fly a kite. The pair form a really genuine friendship before she ends up moving to Barcelona, leaving him alone once again. And unfortunately, Robot is hauled away from the beach and sold for scrap before Dog can rescue him, despite trying so hard to do so. Robot is eventually rescued and put back together in a new form by a raccoon named Rascal, while Dog gets a new robot friend named Tin. And once again, we see these friendships and connections forged between characters. Real, genuine love between people. And the film ends with what is probably my favorite sequence in any film from 2023. Robot sees Dog and Tin across the street from his new apartment with Rascal. He imagines running down and reuniting before realizing how awkward their reunion would be now that they've got these new people in their lives. And so instead, with his new boombox body, Robot blasts September out the window. Shown through split screen, Dog and Robot dance together one last time, showcasing that their connection was and always will be important. It's now a part of who they are, even if they don't get to continue that connection in the same form. It is such a profound, moving, sweet, and sad ending. How incredible that this film about a dog and a robot can say so much about humanity, about the relationships we form, and about how we grow and move on. It's a near masterpiece, and I am so glad it got nominated for the Academy Award this year.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Across the Spiderverse was easily my most anticipated movie of the year, and damn did it live up. I cannot say enough about how much I love this film. Obviously, on a visual and technical level, it's just peak. It's the pinnacle of 3D animated feature filmmaking, at least at this point in time. The fact that they managed to blend so many different characters of different art styles together without entirely scrambling my brain. The fact that every single universe maintains its own unique art style, with my favorite being the mind-meltingly gorgeous portrayal of Gwen's universe, Earth 65. I truly am begging Sony to do a full Ghost Spider film in this style. I think these are among the most beautiful scenes ever animated in history, particularly when the watercolor backgrounds shift, change, and melt to match the emotions within the scenes. I cannot get enough of this. And this is made all the more impactful by the fact that Gwen is essentially promoted to a co-lead in this film alongside Miles, and her story is deeply resonant. The first film obviously puts a huge focus on familial relationships, and this one follows suit for both Gwen and Miles. The fact that Gwen's father is actively hunting her alter ego is such a great conflict, and his refusal to see his daughter behind his complete misconceptions about that alter ego is really heart-wrenching. Played with the fact that because of the death of her Peter, Gwen struggles to open up to anybody at all, to feel accepted by anyone because of the complicated nature of that dual life, and the fact that she knows her father won't accept her for who she is, which is also obviously super queer-coded. There's a reason so many LGBTQ folks connected to Gwen's story in this, which of course created plenty of very normal discourse from the folks who disagreed. But Gwen's struggles tie in so beautifully to Miles' story as well. Gwen finds some semblance of a support system in the Spider Society, but the reality is that the person she truly felt seen by was Miles. The tragic irony being that this is the one person that society tells her she cannot see. And Miles has this parallel journey, struggling to maintain the balance between his two lives, struggling to live up to his parents' expectations, struggling to decide if he can tell his parents who he really is, and he also finds that support and refuge in his relationship to Gwen.
You and me,
We're the same. In the important ways.
I love the way Gwen's own mistakes and lessons here tie into her father's as well. Gwen's harsh lesson is that this Spider Society was never the support system she needed, and that she had effectively thrown the most important person to her under the bus to maintain its status quo, because the system told her this was the right thing to do. And this was exactly what her father was doing to her, throwing his own daughter under the bus because his job told him that she was the enemy, that she was in the wrong. Just like Captain Stacy should have known who Gwen was and what she stood for, Gwen should have known the same thing about Miles, and I adore the way that her father's unexpected choice to resign and their reconciliation propels Gwen forward, to go far out of her way, put herself in danger, and fix her mistake, something I cannot wait to see play out in the next film. Miles' journey hits on similar themes in a different way. He has truly the most supportive parents you could hope for, but he of course fears what might happen if he tells them the truth, if he explains to them exactly why he's been letting them down, and so he seeks support elsewhere, in people who he relates to through his Spidey origins, particularly Gwen, only to discover that this group doesn't actually stand for what he knows is right, that they've been misguided and don't actually see who he is, and that tragically, even Gwen and Peter have been maintaining the status quo that excludes him. Miles ultimately recognizes that even when he messes up, even when his parents are disappointed in him, they see who he is, which is why him attempting to open up and reveal his alter ego to his mother is such a beautiful completion of his arc in this film, at least internally, because obviously the reality is that this was the wrong universe, leading to the cliffhanger. Look, I know a chunk of modern audiences are allergic to cliffhangers, but I cannot take anyone seriously who claims this is only half a movie. Yes, there are unresolved plot points leading into the final film, but Gwen and Miles have fully completed arcs that are clearly defining their motivations for Beyond the Spider-Verse. If anything, this is like a movie and a half, because they really lead into that cliffhanger setup. But if your biggest issue with Across the Spider-Verse is that you're upset that you have to wait for more, firstly, I'd hate for you to have experienced any of the Lord of the Rings films in theaters, and secondly, I'd argue that's a pretty damn good issue to have. You simply want more of it. Honestly, even though I've already done a 20-minute video on the movie, I think I need to make another video about Across the Spider-Verse. There is so much to unpack in this thing. It's an absolutely incredible piece of storytelling, and I just can't wait for the finale. All that I ask is that Sony gives them the time and budget to craft the third film without crunching or running their animators ragged. For the love of God, the artists who made this thing possible absolutely deserve that. Okay, so which one deserved the win? Is it that simple? Honestly, these are all such different films. How do you even compare them directly? Personally, I think it's pretty fair to say that both Boy and the Heron and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse realistically deserved this award. And I also think Robot Dreams was not far behind. And I guarantee you that there are many people out there who connected most to Neona and really wanted that to win. And Elemental was also nominated. For me, Boy and the Heron and Across the Spider-Verse were genuinely my two favorite animated films of the year, and with the race so neck and neck, why did it go to Boy and the Heron? Well, I think there are a handful of factors. For one, this could very well be Miyazaki's final film. They already blew it awarding Frozen Over the Wind Rises in 2013, and G-Kids genuinely did an incredible job marketing and creating buzz surrounding Boy and the Heron's US release this time. Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse was a massive success, even more so than the first film, which was a clear favorite back in 2018, taking home the award. This one even managed to test the limits of 3D animation beyond what the first had, so why didn't it win? Well, I think there are three other big factors here. One, it's the cliffhanger. Personally, I think that's a stupid reason to discount the film, but there is no doubt that many people felt the narrative was unresolved, and therefore the film didn't deserve the recognition as a whole story. Again, I think this is a stupid reason, but it is what it is. Two, a reason I don't see discussed as much, it's a sequel. The Academy is very averse to awarding sequels this award. In fact, in the history of the category, 13 sequels or spin-offs have been nominated, and only 2 have ever won the award, those being Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4. Despite Spider-Verse's success, there is just generally less enthusiasm for sequels amongst Academy members. And lastly, it's the bad press for the way the animators were treated during Across the Spider-Verse's production. I think they mostly managed to curb the criticism throughout award season, but with many Academy members being peers, there is no doubt that the expose left a bad taste in some of the voters' mouths. Each of these alone, I'm not sure would have been enough to dethrone Spider-Verse, but when you stack them on top of each other, and you put them up against our literal greatest living animator who dropped a masterpiece at age 83, it was simply too much. And you know what? That's okay. Boy and the Heron is incredible. It's also, shockingly, only the second ever 2D traditionally animated film to ever win the award. The first being Miyazaki's Spirited Away 22 years ago. I am truly so happy that The Boy and the Heron won this award in a year with some of my favorite animated films in history. I would rather see the Academy break from some of their more intense biases than go with the one that made the biggest splash, even though I think Spider-Verse is an incredible film. But on top of that, y'all, there are so many great films that went unrecognized this year. If you haven't seen them yet, please watch Blue Giant, Suzume, Unicorn Wars, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. There are even more that I haven't seen. This is just a great year, an outstanding year for animation, one of the best in history. The Boy and the Heron is such a cool win in a year of incredible work. And again, if you like this analysis, please go check out my giant video on the whole history of this category at the Academy Awards. And if you follow me on Letterboxd, you can get a sneak peek at big projects like this. You would have seen all 99 films logged on Letterboxd over the last few months. And do me a favor, comment below what your favorite animated movie of the year was, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.